The night was covered in snow. Silence filled the air, but behind that silence the echoes of gunfire hid. Across the frozen fields, men and steel clashed with fury. Chinese soldiers dressed in white lay silently in ambush. On the other side, American troops sat in their camps, unaware that the next few moments would be their last. It was the winter of 1950. The Korean War was at its peak. The world had barely begun to recover from the wounds of the Second World War when a new war was born, a war between North and South, but in truth, between America and China. The story begins at the end of World War II. 1945, the year the world saw Nazi Germany and Japan fall. But with that victory came a new kind of division, the Red and the Blue world. The Red world, communism, led by the Soviet Union and later by China. The Blue world, democracy, led by the United States. The war had ended, but the battle of ideologies had just begun, and the battleground became a small country, Korea. Once, Korea was a single nation. But when Japan was defeated, its control was split into two, the North under Soviet influence and the South under American influence. At first, this division was meant to be temporary, but with time, the gap grew deeper. In the North, a communist regime rose under Kim Il-sung. In the South, a US-backed democracy under Syngman Rhee. Both sides filled with hatred, suspicion, and the thirst for power. And then, on the morning of June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded the South. Tanks, artillery, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers stormed southward. Within days, Seoul, the capital of South Korea, had fallen. The world was stunned. The United Nations held an emergency meeting. The United States declared, greater than, we will not remain silent. If we fail to stop northern aggression today, then tomorrow, every free nation will be in danger. And thus, America entered the Korean War. Under the command of General Douglas MacArthur, thousands of American troops were deployed to Korea alongside United Nations forces from Britain, Canada, Australia, Turkey, and others. At first, North Korea had the upper hand. American and UN troops were forced to retreat. But then MacArthur came up with a daring plan, the Incheon Landing. In September 1950, US forces launched a risky amphibious assault, striking the enemy from behind. Within days, they recaptured Seoul. The world was astonished. America had turned the tide. North Korean forces began to retreat. The Americans advanced, closer and closer to the Chinese border. And there, the story took a new turn. At that time, China was a new nation. In 1949, Mao Zedong had successfully led the Communist Revolution. For China, the war was a warning, because the US Army was now standing right at its doorstep. In Beijing, a secret meeting was held. Mao told his commanders, if we stay silent today, tomorrow, the Americans will be inside our homes. We must move forward. The world had no idea that within a few weeks, China would enter the war, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. That was the beginning, when a small regional conflict turned into a confrontation between the world's two greatest powers. The night air was thick with snow. High in the mountains, only one sound could be heard in the darkness: footsteps. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were China's volunteer troops, soldiers the world never saw coming, and when it did, it was already too late. October 1950, winter was tightening its grip over North Korea's mountains. The Yalu River, which separated China and Korea, had turned into a sea of ice. Across this frozen river, hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers were preparing to cross. No lights, no gunfire, no noise, only silence. Each soldier wrapped his boots in cloth to muffle the sound. Scarves covered their faces, old rifles in their hands, and in their hearts, only one conviction. We have come to defend our border, even if it costs our lives. China called this war its volunteer mission. They didn't even inform the United Nations. The world had no idea that China had entered the war. On the other side, US General Douglas MacArthur was overconfident. He believed the war was already won. He even sent a report to Washington saying, Our troops will be home by Christmas. But fate had another plan. When U.S. forces approached the Yalu River, suddenly bullets rained down from the mountains. Thousands of soldiers were stunned. Who were these men so silent, so organized, and so deadly? They were Chinese soldiers, crossing the frozen river in the darkness of night to attack. The American army began to retreat. For the first time, the world witnessed a new, powerful China stepping onto the battlefield. It became one of the coldest and most brutal battles in history. Location: Chosin Reservoir. Temperature: -35 degrees Celsius. American rifles froze in their hands. Their boots tore apart in the ice. Supplies were gone, communications cut, and from the mountains came wave after wave of Chinese troops falling like snow itself. One American soldier wrote in his diary, "We never imagined death could come this quietly. They appeared at night, vanished by morning, as if the earth had swallowed them whole." Chinese troops surrounded the Americans completely. Only one option remained: retreat. The United States carried out one of the most difficult withdrawals in history. Thousands were wounded, but their discipline never broke. They dug their brothers out of the snow, carried the injured on their shoulders, and fought their way back to the southern coast. This retreat is still known as the Frozen Retreat. It wasn't a defeat, it was a retreat with dignity. But afterward, MacArthur sent a shocking message to Washington. "If we are to stop China, we must use the atomic bomb." Those words shook the entire world. President Harry Truman immediately stopped MacArthur. He didn't want a third world war. If the US had dropped an atomic bomb on China, the Soviet Union would have entered the conflict, and the world might have been destroyed. Thus, Washington removed MacArthur from command. China and America now stood face to face, but both knew one more step could set the entire world ablaze. The war dragged on until 1953. Millions were killed. In the end, both sides agreed to an armistice. Even today, between North and South Korea lies the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, where the world's most heavily armed soldiers stand watch, staring at each other, but never firing a shot. The war ended, but its echoes still live on in the politics of China and the United States. This was the war where two superpowers didn't officially face off, but still stood against each other. It was the moment when the world saw China stepping onto the global stage, strong and unyielding. And now, 70 years later, those same two nations are once again in conflict, not with weapons, but with technology and trade. If you want to know where and how the next US-China war might begin, the secret strategies of both nations, the role of AI and military robots, and the shocking prediction that stunned the world, comment "Next War." Subscribe so you're the first to see the next part. And don't forget to like if you enjoyed this story.